This video will contain spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen chapters 113, 114, 115, and 116, and Season 2, Episode 16, otherwise known as Episode 40. So the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen is thundering, and in this series, I'm going to be analyzing the story of the series as it airs and as a manga reader, comparing the anime to the manga to see what they pulled over directly, what they modified or expanded, and what they just straight up removed. So let's begin with the 16th episode of Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. First, I'll recap the plot and explain what chapters it covered. The episode begins as Megami attempts to visualize winning against his father. He summons Rabbit Escape, but both of them are distracted by the sudden appearance of Sukuna's presence nearby. As Megami is distracted, Toji flies through Rabbit Escape straight towards him, pointy end first. He manages to dodge and flee down a side street, strategizing as he goes. He decides he has to end the bout quickly, and as he considers his sole advantage, we cut away to the Shibuya tollgate on the Metropolitan Expressway Route No. 3 Shibuya line. A makeshift field hospital is patrolled by cursed corpses courtesy of Principal Yaga Masamichi. He is inside protecting Shoko. She smokes and tells him she should be fine, but he refuses to leave her unprotected as the sole white mage who can heal their fighters. He notes that if it weren't for her, Ijichi and Ino would have already been dead, revealing the field hospital is where they were evacuated to. Yaga asks why she's smoking if she quit, and Shoko remarks that she's just feeling nostalgic for her student days with Geto and Gojo. Cutting back to Megami's frantic encounter, he manipulates Toji into a narrow street. He notes that his sole advantage is that Shoko is in Shibuya, so as he can't risk any of his Shikigami here, he has to risk his own body instead. If he can limit any damage he takes to something Shoko can heal, he can get fixed up and jump back into battle. Megami points out that Toji's speed makes him practically impossible to see, that he's like Maki, but fully realized. He has to time his next maneuver just right or he'll die. Just as he thinks this, the pointy end is inches away from him. Toji's leg sinks into the ground, throwing off his aim and causing Megami to be stuck in the side by the stake. Megami had used his shadow to make a pitfall for Toji to fall into, and capitalizes on the moment to launch his sword from his shadow into his hand. He goes for a stab on Toji's side, but Toji is too fast and retreats before it can connect. Realizing he's running out of options, Megami considers using his suicidal attack Gojo told him to stop jumping to as a first resort. Suddenly, Toji seems to have a moment of realization, and has a flashback to meeting Naobito in Kyoto Station, when Megami was still a small child. He remembers offering Megami up for money to Naobito, should he manifest one of the family's techniques, and thinking how if he were to have a technique, the Zenin family might be better for him than it was for Toji and his lack of cursed energy. Rousing from his reverie, he asks Megami what his name is, and Megami answers with their last name of Fushiguro. As Toji is relieved that his son didn't end up a Zenin after all, his heavenly restriction allows him to overwrite even the out-of-control technique that resurrected him, and he stabs himself in the head, removing himself from the picture once again. Megami watches as Toji's face turns back into Sweater Boy, and even though he starts to consider the other's reaction to seeing him, he puts it out of his mind and focuses on his next task. Before he can do so though, look who decided to come back. If it isn't blonde shithead. He swipes Megami across the back, who collapses, and reinforces why he's a shithead with flaxen locks. We cut away to the front of Shibuya Stream at 11:01 p.m. and see what Kusakabe and Panda are up to. They seem to have a bit of a strained working relationship, and we learn that it's because of Kusakabe's fear of having to actually confront anything too dangerous. So he's wasting time and taking advantage of Panda's inherent lack of a sense of direction in the urban environment to do so. As he's planning his next time waster, two enemies suddenly appear on a walkway above the two, asking if they're sorcerers with Jujutsu High. The male of the duo asks them to give up, as he doesn't want to kill a sorcerer. Panda and Kusakabe note that they're probably surrounded, and Kusakabe responds that he'd love to comply but can't just give up. Instead, he asks them to tell their story and take as much time as possible. Here we have a flashback where we see the crumbling of Geto's faction of curse users following his death at the end of the movie. Nanako and Mimiko, RIP, obviously want to just get Geto out of his body, but the others aren't as concerned with the desecration of the dead, instead prioritizing realizing the world Geto wanted to create. They nearly come to blows, but the least reasonable-looking person present offers the most reasonable approach and reassures the group. The story ends and Kusakabe is a little disappointed it's already over. Nonetheless, he figures if there's an entire faction present with sorcerers of this caliber, he can focus on fighting them and avoid having to fight any special grades. As Kusakabe takes his stance to perform his evening moon sword drawing technique, the male sorcerer above motions to call the attack, when suddenly a giant explosion rocks a building across the street behind them. All of them look on in shock as Sukuna and Jogo come flying out of the building, with Sukuna clearly dominating Jogo and taunting him. Jogo attempts to retaliate, but Sukuna is back on his DBZ batting people around in the air bullshit that we saw him pull out against Megami back in Season 1. He pulls a double axe handle / hammer fist on Jogo's head, before catching up to him, grabbing him by the face, and slamming him into the roof of the Shibuya police station, sending him falling downward through many floors. He takes the opportunity to continue taunting Jogo, which Jogo doesn't take too kindly to, and sends fire exploding out of many holes in the building they just created. Sukuna escapes the building to the highway nearby, and Jogo gives chase while activating his maximum technique, Meteor. Now, Jogo doesn't look much like a behemoth from Final Fantasy to me, but nonetheless, he does indeed summon a giant meteor. We cut to Kusakabe and Panda attempting to make a break for it upon seeing the meteor, but the two Geto faction curse users' underlings attempt to stop them. Before the two can finish calling them off, Kusakabe completes a Bateau sword drawing, dropping both of them. Kusakabe tries to be decent, warning the curse users that they're ants being tap-danced on by elephants in the face of the special grade battle unfolding in front of them, and everyone should run. Suddenly, Sukuna is right next to them and tells them he won't allow it. He commands them to stay in place until he says they can move, threatening to shred to ribbons anyone who moves before his command. Panda, who's never seen Sukuna in control of Yuji's body, seems confused seeing his friend this way, but Sukuna continues his sadistic game, paying no attention to the tuxedo bear. At the last moment, he finally gives the go-ahead, and everyone scatters. The meteor collides with the ground, decimating a large swath of Shibuya. Jogo is convinced that must have hurt even Sukuna, who appears next to him claiming it might have if it had even hit him. He asks Jogo why he won't use his domain, and Jogo responds that he knows he'd lose a domain battle. Sukuna taunts him some more, but stands and agrees to take on Jogo with his own specialty. He says some black speech and then open, and suddenly, he's a firebender. Jogo seems surprised, and Sukuna mentions that he figured he would know about that, but being that he's a cursed spirit, it makes sense he wouldn't. He also tells the audience they don't get an explanation by telling Jogo he won't cheat by revealing his curse technique. The two square up their fireballs. They shape their fireballs into their desired shapes, Jogo keeping it classic and Sukuna going with a fire arrow. We cut to a white void, where Jogo is talking to Dagon and Hanami, and apologizes for losing. He mentions that Mahito is still out there and will grow stronger, and they'll all meet again when they reincarnate. He restates their belief that they are the true humans, and Sukuna makes note of his goal. He tells Jogo he simply didn't have the necessary hunger to reach his true potential, that to reach the heights of Gojo and those like him, you have to throw away everything except an insatiable desire to be the strongest and defeat everyone you meet, a philosophy the veracity of which I'm doubtful on, considering Gojo didn't really seem that way given his ideals and goals, and still was one of the strongest sorcerers in history. Anyway, Sukuna throws Jogo a bone and tells him he was entertaining and stood out amongst the myriad sorcerers, humans, and cursed spirits he'd fought over the last 1,000 years. He throws him a compliment, and Jogo tears up, the big sappy boy. The conversation concludes with Jogo incinerated, which is some burned-out fire truck level irony. Suddenly, that monk from earlier drops onto the meteor, addressing Sukuna as Master, and that they've come to escort him. Sukuna doesn't recognize them at first, but then realizes who they are, and we finally get a name, Uraume. We then cut away to the 109 building intersection at 11:07 p.m., and see his blonde shithead is menaced by something, as Megami seems to be dead on the ground, and the episode ends. With the recap out of the way, let's go over the main points of the plot. 1. Toji and Megami have their father-son bonding time, and Toji ends it by removing himself from the equation once again. Satisfied, his son avoided being taken in by the Zenin family. 2. As Megami attempts to move on to his next task, blonde shithead ambushes him. 3. Kusakabe and Panda are wasting time to avoid anything too dangerous when they're confronted by 2 curse users from the former faction associated with Geto. 4. After their explanation, a fight seems ready to break out when they all get sucked into the fight between Jogo and Sukuna. 5. Jogo drops a meteor on Shibuya, but fails to hurt Sukuna, who unveils his ability to also use fire techniques, somehow, which he refuses to explain. 6. Jogo and Sukuna fight fire with fire, and Jogo loses. 7. Elsewhere nearby, blonde shithead is menaced by something real strong, as Megami seems to be dead. Now let's get into some analysis. First, let's talk about what we know of Sukuna's techniques so far. As far as we've seen, it involves slicing and dicing, and even Jogo mentions that he assumed that was Sukuna's technique. However, in this episode, we see him somehow gain the ability to also use fire like Jogo. He makes a reference to Jogo not knowing about it because he's a cursed spirit. The best theory I've seen regarding this was that there seems to be a link between cursed techniques, cursed energy, and the brain. Sukuna, given his knowledge of cursed techniques and cursed energy, seems to know how to do something involving the brain that expands his technique. The reason a cursed spirit wouldn't know about this would probably have to be that their biology is obviously different from a human's, so they don't have a brain per se and can't perform the same kind of ability. Not to mention, cursed spirits are far more pigeonholed in their techniques and usage as they are born from very specific circumstances, being that they come to exist due to negative emotions born from humans regarding specific topics/targets. Since humans aren't restricted in this same way, it makes sense they may have the capability of breaking out of their conceived constraints of their techniques if they can manage to wrap their mind around the concept. Whether this is genuinely gaining access to entirely new techniques or has more to do with manipulating or expanding the interpretation of a technique, as we saw Megami do in Season 1 when he unlocked his domain expansion, is unknown. As a closing note, I want to point out that I'm not being evasive here due to the answer already being given in the manga, as I sometimes do to avoid spoilers for anime-only fans. Even if you're entirely caught up on the manga, to this day, over 3 years and 125 chapters later, this still has not been explained. Next, we'll go on a Juju stroll. We have a bit of a juicy one this week, as we got to see several new places. First, let's go over where the fight between Toji and Megami took place. We already saw the street-level view of where they ended up after jumping out of the sky bridge, so here's the side street Megami flees to, as distinguished by this giant lantern-looking art piece that was visible. Next, we have the Shibuya tollgate where Shoko has set up an impromptu field hospital. You can see it here along the Metropolitan Expressway Route number 3, and here is its position in relation to the Scramble Crossing. We have the spot where Toji met with Naobito back when Megumi was still very young. The place in question is Kyoto Station, which is, of course, in Kyoto. We know this initially because of the establishing shot of the Kyoto Tower, a distinctive landmark, but also the layout of the interior of this station is obviously identical to what's shown in the anime. As this is an entirely different city, here's its position in the country in relation to Tokyo. Next, we have the Shibuya Stream building. Here's the spot where we see Kusakabe and Panda exit onto street level initially, with a two-tier balcony walkway where the curse users appear. If we head this way past them, we can see the building that Jogo and Sukuna explode out of, though it's a bit farther away than it appears from the walkway perspective we saw it from. Perspective is a crazy thing. Then, we have this distinctive building that Sukuna sent Jogo careening downwards through. You can see the cubic shapes on either end of the building to confirm this is the right building, and it is indeed the Shibuya police station, as I mentioned in the recap. Finally, we have the 109 building intersection featured at the tail end of the episode. This is almost as iconic as the Scramble Crossing, and is literally just up the street from it. It's literally just the next intersection over to the northwest. An interesting tidbit of trivia is that the 109 building, also known as Shibuya 109, is actually a department store, and the logo is trademarked. So oftentimes, when this building is depicted, the number will be changed to avoid running afoul of that trademark. One example is in The World Ends With You in Kingdom Hearts. This building is known as the 104, or 1FO, if you believe Fret, building. Interestingly, for the sequel, Neo The World Ends With You, Square actually got permission to use the original 109 logo, but decided to keep it 104 since it had left such a strong impression on players. In Ghostwire Tokyo, they instead made it the 429 building, and I'm pretty sure in another anime somewhere I saw it as the 110 building. Shibuya 109 was originally opened in April 1979 and was intended to draw fashion-conscious women in their early 30s, but over time has instead become a fashion mecca for younger women involved in the Gyaru subculture, which I'm not going to go into now, but you can look it up if you're interested. Finally, let's go over the bonus pages from these chapters in the manga. First, after chapter 113, we get a thirst trap drawing of Toji looking like Goku in the other world, because Akutami really likes Toji. After chapter 114, we get a sketch page of Jogo complaining about how he always gets paired up against opponents stronger than him, which is a good point. Seeing how he handled Nanami Maki and Naobito last episode showed how strong he could actually be, but we've only seen him fight Gojo and Sukuna otherwise, the two strongest characters in the series, which makes him seem like a joke even though he is quite powerful. There is no bonus page after chapter 115 as it ends the volume, so let's go to chapter 116. After chapter 116, we get the results of the 2020 Valentine's Day character popularity poll. Note, this is a poll conducted amongst the Japanese fans, which Akutami points out the poll was held right around the time the past arc was ending in the manga. As the poll was Valentine's themed, the votes were effectively how many Valentines each character received. Surprising no one, Gojo came in first, much to Akutami's consternation, followed by Geto, which Akutami is okay with, and it is even close with a 24 Valentine gap. Then Megumi with only 7 less Valentines. Akutami says he needs to try harder as he's always liked Megumi. And finally, Yuji with just 1 less Valentine than Megumi, with Akutami commenting on him just squeaking by as the main character. And that's my episode recap and story analysis for the 16th episode of the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen. Make sure to subscribe and turn on bell notifications if you want to be here as soon as possible each week as I put out new videos for each episode as it airs. And feel free to drop a comment with suggestions as to other videos you might like to see, such as character analysis videos or explanations. Thanks for watching.